All right, welcome back to First Chapter Friday. Today we are reading The Queen's Assassin by Melissa de la Cruz. So you know I love a good cover. We all know this at this point, and The Queen's Assassin has a really good one. This is from our recent book haul. So this is a great cover. It's really interesting looking. Like, I'm intrigued. This is not a book I have read before. So this is our first read for everyone, unless you have read it. I don't know. So I don't know much about it. So let's go ahead and read the back together first, and then we'll read the first chapter. All right, so reading the back. Caldon Holt is the kingdom's deadliest weapon. No one alive can best him in speed, strength, or brains, which is why he's the Hearthstone Guild's most dangerous member. Cal is also the Queen's assassin, bound to her by magic and unable to leave her service until the task she's set for him is fulfilled. Shadow of the Honeyglade has been training all her life to join the guild, hoping that one day she'll become an assassin as feared and revered as Cal. But Shadow's mother and aunts expect her to serve the crown as a lady of the Renovian court. When a surprise attack brings Shadow and Cal together, they're forced to team up as an assassin and an apprentice. Even though Shadow's life belongs to the court and Cal's belongs to the queen, they cannot deny their attraction to each other. But now, with war on the horizon and true love at risk, Shadow and Cal will uncover a shocking web of lies that will change their paths forever. Okay, so we get a duo of romance and fantasy. Love that for us. This makes sense now because it says bound by fate, broken by love on the cover, so that checks out. So it sounds like this one is fairly new. The copyright is 2020, and then it looks like there's a sequel they mentioned on the back, so I'm gonna guess this is a duology where there's just 2 books in the series, but there definitely is one that comes after this, which is great if you're a series person. So let's go ahead, take a look at this. Melissa de la Cruz has written a lot of things. This is a list of all of her publications. There's also a cool map in the front. It's nice and complex, which I always feel better when there's a good map in the front of books because it just tells me the author has done a lot of world building. And so, like, especially in fantasy, there's going to be a lot of detail included. That's just comforting to me. I always look for good maps. So it looks like we have a little bit of a prologue before we get to the actual first chapter. So we're going to go ahead and read that together. And then save the actual first chapter for you to read on your own. All right, so we're going to read the prologue. Here we go. Excerpt from the Scroll of Omen 1.2, A Comprehensive History of Aventine. Long ago, when all the kingdoms of Aventine were united as one under the great goddess Dia, the mighty Della Fiore dynasty ruled over the land. There lived a terrible man named Phras. Though he had some measure of wealth in his own right, Phras was deeply envious of his cousin, the king, who came from the Della Fiore bloodline on his mother's side and had much stronger magical ability. This envy ate at Phras's heart and mind until one day it consumed him entirely, and he murdered the king, taking the crown for himself. Once in power, he erased all records of the Della Fiores so that in the future the history of Aventine would begin with him, King Phras I. But instead of winning the people's hearts, he became known as the Tyrant King, for he was a cruel man, paranoid and consumed by the desire to keep magical power to himself. With promises of riches and power beyond their ken, the Tyrant King amassed a great and powerful army, which he sent out into the land to collect every scrap of the mystical sacred texts they could find, from recipes for potions and poultices to spell books and arcane tomes filled with dark magic and demonology. A council of his most loyal followers compiled a single document from them. They became known as the Dean Scrolls, the fount of all magical history, information, practice, and use. No one in the kingdom was allowed to access the scrolls save for the group who had put them together, who called themselves Afrasians, after the king. Though through their efforts, King Phras learned the secrets of the darkest magic in the universe and ruled as king and sorcerer. The Afrasian order served as his magical soldiers and were given the castle of Bear to use as they wished. It was there that they founded their abbey. Meanwhile, magic was decreed forbidden to the common folk, especially for the wise women, who were considered a great threat to the king and his men. Brave witches saved as much magic as they could, which they passed on secretly. Thus, the Hearthstone Guild was formed. In the early days, the guild was simply an underground organization dedicated to preserving common and household magic. Only later did it become a society of assassins and spies. The surviving Delafiores went into hiding. Extinct, it was said. The bloodline had died out. They were forgotten, as were the myths about mages and demons. Over the course of his 300-year rule, numerous revolts broke out against the tyrant king, and in the wake of the tumult of his death, Aventine fractured into different kingdoms, all vying for power. Renovia to the west, Montrese to the north, Argonia to the south, Stabin to the east. Bear Abbey lay to the west, and thus Ephraisian monks fell under Renovia's rule. While they were subject to their king or queen, over time their power grew so great that their leaders began to disregard the monarch and act on their own accord. After all, many of them were high-ranking aristocrats themselves. The Ephraisians believed they were subservient to no one, collecting tithes and levying taxes as they pleased. There were rumors that they kept Renovia locked in an endless cycle of wars with its neighbors, selling magic to the highest bidder and fanning hostilities while feigning loyalty to the crown. Thus did the Ephraisian monks maintain the control of the Dean Scrolls for centuries, doling out wisdom in bits and pieces as they saw fit, forcing commoners to consult them for all sorts of spiritual and physical ailments, wearing a mask of obedience before royalty as they pulled the strings of the puppet monarchs. That is until the tyrant king's descendant, King Esben, toured his lands and saw the effect that lifetimes of high taxes and spiritual oppression had on his people. He decided enough was enough. Magic and knowledge belonged to all. He vowed to end the Ephraisians' reign of terror once and for all. So rather than follow in his forefathers' footsteps, King Esben chose to follow the peace treaty and not to attack Montrese in retaliation for their anger at his Montresian bride, as his advisors counseled. Instead, he declared war on the Ephraisians and descended upon Bear Abbey. After a lengthy battle, the king's army prevailed, but it did so at great cost. In an act of selfless bravery, King Esben gave his life for his kingdom. Despite his sacrifice, the Dean Scrolls were not found. They disappeared along with the tattered remnants of the Ephraisian order. King Esben's widow, Queen Liliana, had been searching for the scrolls ever since. They are the only remaining collection of Dean magic, aside from knowledge that was passed down from the guild and from grandmother to mother to daughter. However, the guild's knowledge is just a fraction of the magic contained in the scrolls, and without them, the queen and the kingdom of Renovia remain vulnerable to threats lurking outside the country's borders, as well as those within. But the queen thinks only of her country. She will stop at nothing to find the scrolls, for they are the key to her family's protection and her country's salvation. I don't know about you, but that was a super solid prologue. I'm really interested now. So I will definitely be reading this, and I will update you guys on how it is. I have high hopes. I feel good about this. But if you would like to read it, also let me know, and I will make sure that this gets to you. Otherwise, have an awesome weekend. Let me know what you think, and I will see you all on Monday. Bye.